The Church of Uganda celebrating 150 years. This is sequel number 95. Welcome. I'm the author Christopher Amos Chikomeko, and we are celebrating the history of our church at 150 years. In these last few days, we've been looking at the wisdom of the Baganda people and their calendar, and we've been aligning it to the other calendars. And all we see is a society so clever, a society so rich in wisdom. We just want to know why. Where did this wisdom come from? But even as we ask that question and answer it, it is worth noting that not only were the Romans so much interested in naming days and seasons after their own gods, the Baganda also did the same. But we must understand, where did the 7-day week come from? Even when the Bible was not exposed to us, because the Bible gives the 7 days, and it is very, very, very understandable there. But the Baganda were not exposed to the Bible. The Babylonians were not exposed to the Bible. How come they recognize a 7-day week? Well, history shows that it was actually the Babylonians who first found out about the 7-day week. Why? That because the moon, in its movement and in its transition between each phase of that moon, there was a phase of the crescent. It took 7 days. There was the phase of the half moon, half. It took 7 days, 7 days. And there was a phase of the full moon, and it also took 7 days. And there was a phase when there was nothing in the sky, and it also took 7 days. And before they knew it, they realized that from one moon to the other, there are these stages, and each are marked by 777. Of course, today we will not agree, because we don't see them happening that way. But maybe that's because of our global warming. Maybe at that time it was exactly that. And that's how they developed the 7-day week. However, it is quite unique to come to notice that even if that was a secret there, the Baganda people also recognized a 7-day week. Very, very interesting. And for them, the very first day was called Mukasa wa Balyammere, which is our modern Wednesday. It used to be the first day of the week. Then the second day of the week was called Kiwanuka w'omuliro. It is our modern Thursday. The third day of the Baganda was called the Nagawonye w'enkuba, which is our Friday, the god of rains, and she was a goddess. So you see how even the Baganda had goddess, women gods. Then the fourth day of the Baganda was Wamunyi Rwadungu. It is our modern Saturday. The fifth day in the Baganda calendar was called Wangu Webiswa, which is what we call Sunday today. The sixth day of the Baganda was called Kazoba Webitonde, which is our modern day Monday. And the seventh day was called Walumbe Najjakulera. Now that is our modern Tuesday. However, after the coming of the Gregorian calendar and realizing that Sunday is the first day of the week, the entire names were realigned. So that realignment could be a little bit confusing, but as long as you know what the Baganda called what and what belonged and what was the first day, I think we are exonerated. So you can see the entire Baganda week is in the hands of their gods. Each day was named after a Muganda god. Now, so are the Romans. Their first day was named after the sun. So it was called Sun's Day, what we call Sunday today. Their second day of the week was called the Moon's Day, which for us today we call Moon Day or Monday. Their third day of the week was called Tiu. Tiu was the god of law for the Romans. Today we call it Tuesday. The fourth day of the Romans was called Wudeni, and Wudeni was the god of gods. And that Wudeni has today transformed in what we call Wednesday. The 50th day of the Romans was called Thor, and it was the god of war. And that Thor has now transformed into Thursday. The 60th day of the Romans was called Frida, and Frida was the god of love. So that Frida has today transformed into what we call Friday. The 7th day of the Romans was called Saturn, not Saturn as in Lucifer, but Saturn, Saturn, who was the god of agriculture. And that Saturn day has now become Saturday. So you can see the current names we give to each day of the week are in the hands or originate from Romans, and each of them are named after a god or a goddess responsible for something. Again, I don't want to call this wisdom, but it is very surprising. The Baganda, long before they knew Western civilization, had 7-day week. Each day was named after a god or a goddess. And here are the Romans, 7-day week, and each of those days has a name belonging to a god or a goddess. Now, I am not wrong to celebrate the Baganda and their wisdom as far as the calendar is concerned. Therefore, let us answer the question, where did this wisdom of the Baganda come from? The 15th day of any lunar month, especially if you are living in the equatorial or in the tropical zones of the world, the full moon has always been recognized as a gate between the heaven and the earth. And they recognize that gate as being open. But we shall see that later. Society had names for stars. These stars we see in the heavens. And some of those stars appeared in seasons. So society learned about them, and also society learned to wait for those stars, especially those who were not regular, and including those who were regular. And this was done across societies. Talk about Babylonia, talk about Europe, talk about Africa. Now, those appearances of the stars coincided with the sunny periods, the rainy seasons, the planting seasons, which means the fertility of the soil, and also the harvest seasons. So those patterns, many societies across the world looked at the stars, that whenever we are harvesting, there is a very bright star there. There is a star nearer the moon, such things. So those were very, very helpful and unique to societies long before civilization. The months, therefore, got names consisting of events happening in those months or seasons, as we have seen, particularly in the case of the Baganda. All of Africa did not resemble in the number of months in a year. We've just seen the Baganda had 10 months. But they agreed on a system of years, or they resembled when it came to a system of years. The Bantu of Africa, for example, many of them had a 13-month year. Yes, just like how we saw in the Bible, the biblical calendar. Some had 12 months, especially with the influence of the Persia Arabs along the coast. 12 again with the influence of the Portuguese and later the British. But some had 10 months, just like in the case of the Baganda. And therefore, for many Bantus, the calendar seasons were governed by events on the ground, such as the invasion of caterpillars, the time of butterfly seasons, the rainy seasons, the strong sunny seasons. There was also some who had animal migration, birds migration. Other societies had bushfires. So those bushfires had a pattern. Now, all these seasons had a pattern, and the pattern was permanent. It was annual. It would happen at the same time exactly. There was no global warming to confuse things the way it has confused our seasons in our generations. I must warn you that Egypt used to belong to black people, not Arabs, the one you see there today. I know this may be a shocker to many of you, but Egypt was a land of black people, not Arabs, for much of our history. Modern Northern Africa was not a desert. It became a desert, but originally it was not a desert. Northern Africa had black people, the descendants of Cush, and I'm talking about the Biblical Cush. But also, it had non-black descendants of Cush brothers. For example, his brother Egypt. Indeed, many pharaohs of Egypt were black. I know this is a shocker to many of you, but this is our history. The River Nile connected the people of Northern and Central Eastern Africa. They did not need any compass to travel. They would just go straight, and the river would make them reach where they wanted to go. That was their highway. There is a proven visit of a pharaoh more than 2,500 years before Christ. That means before David, before many of the biblical stories. A pharaoh in Egypt visited Eastern Africa, and the evidence was found in Rwanda, where they found cavings and stones which were Egyptian. And that showed that they could only travel, or they could only be in the company of a pharaoh or a pharaoh. Their calendar was much older than the old Babylonian celebrated calendar, but it was never documented, nor was it ever recorded, and that was the problem. But it recognized a year of purely 360 days, and that would translate to 12 lunar months. In tropics and equatorial region, it was easy to recognize the 12th cycle of the moons. The descendants of Cush, the Biblical Cush, first migrated to West Africa for centuries, leaving the central and the eastern part of Africa for aboriginals, the remnants of Cush brothers and descendants. And remember, the Bible talks about the brothers of Cush as being Libya, Canaan. The Bible says Cush descendants was Seba, or you can call them Bushmen. There was Havilah, there was Sabta, there was Rama, and there was Sabteka. And then later on in life, Cush was given birth to. Sorry, not Cush, Nimrod. Nimrod is one of the very last child of Cush. And therefore, if Nimrod is the ancestor of Babylon, it means Babylonia is much, much later than Africa or Seba, the Bushmen, the Aboriginals. It was not until 1,000 years after Christ that the next migration of the Cush descendants from West Africa to Central and Eastern and Southern Africa was registered. These descendants of Cush were now called Bantu. They migrated, and they settled in the Congo forests. Others in Eastern Africa, including where we are today in Uganda. The rest to Southern Africa. And that is why the Bantu share so many common words in pronunciation, although the meaning may be different. But it's amazing how people in Zulu and KwaZulu and Botswana speak words that actually resemble each other, despite the fact that they migrated in different areas. Throughout the migration, the lunar month was recognized from one new moon to the other. The stars were identified, just like in Egypt, and some were even worshipped as gods. They gave them names. From West Africa, all the Bantu believed that on the 15th day of the lunar month, when the moon was full, that it was a gate between the stars and the earth, and therefore they would do a lot of worshipping. The same still happens today. Some of the stars disappeared for a time and then reappeared, and that sequence was noticed and became an indicator of seasons among the Bantu of Africa. And this Bantu of Africa included the Batembuzi, included the Bachwezi, included the Banyamwezi, included the Zulu, included the Sotho, included the Vendebere, and many others. They learned to wait for these seasons, and they were not disappointed. Why? Because the pattern was always exactly that. There was no global warming, which is what has changed for us things today. So, the star appearances seasons created planting season, harvesting season, God worshipping season, God's renewal worship seasons, festival seasons, and each cycle resembled the other. Being Bantu, they resembled in behavior, but differed in names. Please note that equatorial and tropical areas had no winter, so the nights were always equal today across the Bantu regions. Some Bantu carried their ancestors or Cush. They carried Cush customs, and those customs included the 360 days year cycle, broken into either 13 or 12 or 10 months. There was a blue moon there, which was a confusion, because there is a specific time after, I think, a number of years where a blue moon appears. Now, that blue moon appears, it means a new moon appearing before the end of the 28 or 29 or 30 days. It appears and then disappears. That's why it's called a blue moon. I don't want to go into details of it, but it was a confusion confuser. Yeah. Anyway, without going into the blue moon area, I just want to let you know that the pattern of the month, especially the sunny ones, created a year cycle for many, many of the Bantu societies across Africa. The same governed calendars across civilization in Babylonia and in Europe. And that is very, very important. So the names would not be the same, but the computation and calculation would be the same. And therefore, that's why there is a lot of recognition in the patterns of the seasons that created years and months and days across civilization. And because of that, as we celebrate 150 years of our church, it was not lost on me that it was worth celebrating the Baganda, the people to whom God chose to plant Christianity first in the interior of Africa. And then from them to the rest of the societies in Africa, in Central Africa, actually Central and Eastern Africa. It was purposely an object of God that happens. And in the sequels, we have just realized that it is worth celebrating that anointment God gave the Baganda. May the good God bless us all.